2 days ago, we told you that the largest open AI model ever built had gone fully public and that almost nobody had downloaded it. 2,850 polls. Fewer downloads than likes, because the file weighs 1.5 terabytes. We went back and checked the same counter this morning. It reads 99,214. That is a 35-fold jump in 48 hours. And it means the thing everyone assumed was the bottleneck was never the bottleneck at all. This is round 4 of our Kimi K3 coverage, and this one is not about the release. It is about what 109 strangers on the internet did to the file once they had it, and about one number that still, stubbornly, refuses to move. First, the counter itself, because this is the correction that matters. When we recorded round 3, the Hugging Face page for Moonshot AI's Kimi K3 showed 2,850 downloads against 5,474 likes. We read that as a physics problem. The model is 96 shards and roughly 1.5 terabytes, so admiration was cheap and possession was not. As of our check today, the same repository reports 99,214 downloads and 7,826 likes. Downloads did not just catch up to likes. They passed them by more than 12 to 1. Second, the sprawl. We queried the Hugging Face model index for anything matching Kimi K3 and got 122 repositories published under 109 distinct accounts. 9 of them are GGUF conversions for the llama.cpp ecosystem. 8 are 4-bit floating point rebuilds. For our MLX builds aimed at Apple hardware. For our prune variants. 2 days ago, there was 1 repository. There are now 122, and the overwhelming majority of them are not copies. They are attempts to make the thing smaller. And third, the mood, which you can read straight off Hacker News. The original weights announcement pulled 1,362 points and 538 comments. An enormous thread by that site's standards. The technical report drew another 385. But the post that tells you the most is a small one. Somebody published a 65 kilobyte binary whose only job is to download Kimi K3 as fast as possible, and titled it, in parentheses, while we can. That is not enthusiasm. That is people mirroring a file because they are not certain it will stay reachable. Now the part that only becomes possible once a few thousand engineers have the actual weights. The architecture gets explained in public by people with no stake in the marketing. 2 write-ups landed on July 28th and both hit the Hacker News front page. Sebastian Rashka published architecture notes and made the sharpest structural observation of the week. Kimi K3 is not a new design. It is a scaled-up production version of Moonshot's earlier Kimi linear research model. Same lineage, roughly 60 times the size. His other catch, they removed rotary position embeddings entirely and run what is called Nope everywhere instead. The second write-up, from the team at Double Word, explains the piece that actually matters, and it deserves plain English. Standard attention makes a model reread its entire history for every single new word, which is why long context is expensive. The cost grows with the square of the length. Kimi Delta Attention replaces that with a fixed-size memory that gets updated incrementally. 3 steps. Forget selectively, using a different decay rate per channel. Predict what the model already thinks the answer is. Then write down only the difference between the prediction and the truth. The author's summary is the best sentence in the whole debate. Write the error, not the value. Read the config file, and you can see exactly how much of the model runs on that idea. 93 layers. 69 of them are Kimi Delta Attention. The remaining 24 are gated multi-head latent attention. 896 experts, 16 firing per token, plus 2 shared. Hidden size 7,168. Vocabulary 163,840. Context 1,048,576 tokens. There is a vision encoder in there too. MoonVT version 2. 401 million parameters. So roughly 3/4 of the depth of this model is the cheap attention, and only 1/4 is the expensive kind. That ratio is the whole trick. The other design decision that only makes sense in hindsight is the number format. Moonshot did not train this at full precision and then squeeze it afterwards. According to the model card, they ran quantization-aware training from the supervised fine-tuning stage onward, with 4-bit weights and 8-bit activations in the MX format. That is why Day Zero deployments happened at all. AMD published a technical article on July 28 walking through Kimi K3 inference on Instinct MI 355X accelerators on Day Zero because the model already arrives in the format those chips want. You do not usually get a Chinese Frontier model and an American chip vendor's deployment guide on the same weekend. But here is the detail we did not expect, and it is our favorite finding this round. Sort the community repositories by downloads, and the winner is not a quantization of Kimi K3 at all. It is a 4.5 gigabyte file called Kimi K3D Spark, sitting at 6,619 downloads. More than any GGUF, any pruned build, anything. It is a draft model for speculative decoding. A small fast model that guesses ahead, so the enormous one only has to check the guesses. Modal, which put K3 into production on July 27th, reported what that buys you. Interactivity went from 100 tokens per second to 460. Throughput per GPU went from 800,000 tokens per minute to 1.5 million. Now the number that will not move. 2 days ago, we reported 6 inference endpoints, all priced identically. We pulled the live provider list again today. There are now 8. Based-in, DigitalOcean, Morph, Nebius, Together, Moonshot itself, and Fireworks twice. 7 of the 8 are listed at exactly $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output. Not close. Identical. And the 8th is not an undercut. It is a second Fireworks tier at $4.50 in and $22.50 out, 50% above the pack. 48 hours of open competition produced 2 more sellers and 0 price movement downward. That floor looks even stranger against the neighbors, and we pulled all of these from the same live price sheet. GLM 5.2, about 77 cents in, $2.42 out. DeepSeek V4 Pro, 44 cents in, 87 cents out. Minimax M3, 30 cents in, $1.20 out. Qwen 3.7 Max, the most expensive of the group, 148 in for 43 out. And here is the one that should make you sit up. Moonshot's own previous coding model, Kimi K 2.7 code, lists at 73 cents in and $3.50 out. The same company sells its older model for roughly a quarter the price of its new one. The best explanation for that floor came out of the Hacker News thread, and it is worth quoting the setup. One commenter asked the obvious question. If you are going to open source your model, why would you set your own price high enough that other providers could easily and profitably undercut you? Another answered by pasting the license. Clause 2 says that if you run a model as a service business and your revenue crosses $20 million over any rolling 12 months, you must go and sign a separate agreement with Moonshot. Nobody has proven that is what is holding the line. But it is the only mechanism anyone has pointed at that would explain 7 sellers landing on the same cent. One more set of numbers, because they puncture a hope. The community spent 2 days trying to shrink this model, and we checked the results file by file. The 1-bit quantization, the most aggressive format in common use, comes to 567 gigabytes across 102 files. The pruned Apple Silicon build is 451 gigabytes. And one rebuild in a 4-bit NVIDIA format actually came out at 1,646 gigabytes, which is larger than the original release. So the smallest usable Kimi K3 on the internet right now is still 450 gigabytes. This did not become a laptop model. It became a slightly cheaper server model. So if the price is not falling, who is actually collecting? According to reporting on Moonshot's fundraising, the company booked $300 million of annual recurring revenue in June, up from $200 million in April, and daily sales have multiplied at least 6 times since Kimi K3 launched. A round that opened earlier this summer at a $31.5 billion valuation is closing. Talks for a further pre-IPO round are expected to begin in August, targeting as much as $50 billion, with Goldman Sachs and China International Capital Corporation advising on a Hong Kong listing. Giving away the weights and holding the price is not a contradiction. It is the strategy. And on markets, strictly for the record, with zero investment advice, and with one correction we want to make carefully. We pulled the closes ourselves. NVIDIA went from $206.84 on July 24th to $196.51 on the 27th, then $197.40 on the 28th. Microsoft rose across the same span, $381.70 to $396.42. AMD fell hard, $521.95 to $458.49, down about 12% in 2 sessions. It would be very easy to hang that on a Chinese model. It is not ours to hang. Coverage of that decline points at AMD's own AI accelerator outlook ahead of its August 4th earnings, and at the chip trade concentrating into NVIDIA. Different story, same week. Which brings us to the reaction that reframes this entire argument. On July 27th, Anthropic published a post on its own position, and the line is unambiguous. Quote, Anthropic has never advocated for a ban on open-weights models. The post goes further, calling open-weight models without dangerous capabilities a public good, and saying protectionist bans would not address its national security concerns. What it does ask for is 3 specific things: export controls and anti-smuggling enforcement on advanced chips, a crackdown on industrial-scale distillation, and mandatory safety testing for every sufficiently capable model, open or closed, American or not. Put that next to what is actually on the table in Washington, and you can see how far the debate has drifted from the facts. Reporting through July describes the administration weighing entity list designations, federal procurement restrictions, and security advisories aimed at Chinese models, tools under consideration, with no executive order signed. The Treasury Secretary said on July 21st that the government will examine Chinese open-source models for intellectual property theft. Meanwhile, the file went from 2,800 copies to 99,000 in 2 days, across 109 accounts, in 9 different formats. Whatever the right policy is, it now has to be a policy about something that is already everywhere. 4 things to watch, and each one is a number you can check yourself. First, the floor. 8 endpoints, 7 at exactly 3 and 15. If a 9th appears below that line, the license theory weakens and the open weights price argument finally gets its test. If the line holds another week, we have learned something durable about what open really costs. Second, the shrink. The smallest usable build is 451 gigabytes today. Watch whether anyone lands under 300 without wrecking quality. That is the threshold where this becomes a small company model rather than a data center one. Third, Beijing. Reporting through July describes China's own Commerce Ministry and Planning Agency discussing limits on overseas access to the country's most capable models, with a tiered scheme floated: filing for weaker open models, security review for stronger ones, and possible restrictions on public release for the most capable. Kimi K3 is out. The question is whether the next one gets to be. And fourth, August, when Moonshot's pre-IPO conversations are expected to start. That is when the market puts a price on the thing this whole series has been circling. What a company is worth when its best product is free to copy and expensive to run. So that is your AI Daily Deep Dive. Round 1 was the hype, Round 2 was the audit, Round 3 was the receipt, and Round 4 is the correction. We told you almost nobody had downloaded it. 99,000 had, within 2 days, and 109 of them started taking it apart. What did not change is the price: 7 sellers, 1 number, not a cent of movement. The weights escaped. The economics did not. If you want Round 5 when the floor either breaks or holds, subscribe. We report what we can verify, we correct what we get wrong, and we do not give investment advice.